Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the second session for today. And so, for those of us that missed the first session, we actually have a recording of it. And so you can find it on the Community Leads Africa space. It's there for anyone to go through. So, well, welcome back, irrespective of the time zone we're on. And currently in Africa, it's around 5:26 p.m. So that's towards in the evening. So, well, welcome back. And we're excited to have you all here. Hopefully, others will be joining us soon. It's not yet, we have 4 minutes left for them to join us, but we're just trying to keep up with the time. So, um, yeah,
Yeah,
I
welcome.
think we have to wait till 5:30 to make the introduction on our next speaker. So, meanwhile, we can all, get to know ourselves better and just give a little introduction about ourselves. So we can see some new faces around, or from what we have initially. So yeah, a little introduction would be nice. So I'm Trust Jamin. Um, I'm a front end engineer, and at the same time, I also actively participate in building communities. So I'm a huge fan of community development, and that has made me to be a good organizer in my locality. So um, the idea of the community leads, we came up with it because we saw there's a need for the communities around us to have that. We had the thing was that for communities there was no clear path as to how to lead one and how to actually make one successful or how to get the full potentials of a community. So that was why what bettered community leads in Africa. So we're hoping that in the near future we should be able to have a very good system that can help to build communities in a better way and in a very less stressful way.
No, I
So,
tend to. Oh,
so um, in 2 minutes we'll be starting, and so we have with us Herin. I won't try to call the other names. So we have with us Herin, and yeah, Herin is actually. Oh, sorry for that mix up. Herin is actually the developer community, the community advocate at Orbit. And so we have her with us this evening, sorry, to be sharing with us how we can actually, um, sorry, I've mixed up the topic.
you're all good.
Okay, sorry. How the topic is, does your business need a community team? Yeah, we all have business at some point, and a lot of companies in Africa usually have community in Africa where they try to, promote whatever product or whatever business they have, and where they try to promote whatever things they have. So, for as a startup founder, or as someone running a company, or as someone owning a business that or a product that developers use, or something that really benefits users, does your business have does your business need a community, or why is it important for your business to have a community? So we have with Erin with us today, and she'll be starting at 5:30. The reason why your business need a community team.
Rad. I think
So
that's good. We all got all the screen share stuff
yeah,
out.
so yeah, it's time now for us to start. So Erin, can you, just before you start, a little introduction about yourself to us so we get to know you better.
Yeah, I'm Erin. I work at Orbit. I've been at Orbit almost a year now, which is the company's pretty new, so it's been there almost the whole time, which is pretty exciting. I'm a community advocate there, which means I kind of bridge community, product. I get to dabble in a lot of different things, working a bunch like alongside a lot of different parts of the company. Before Orbit, I've worked with brands like Unsplash. I was a head of community previously, and I actually came through community building from product. So I did a lot of user research, product. I've been really fortunate to work with brands like Unsplash, the Financial Times, Eat Sleep, and now I'm here. But yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So that means you have quite a lot of experience around different industries.
We hopped around, and I think that's one of the strengths that I've applied to community building in this world. And I think this is also what's made me really passionate. Kind of what we'll dive into today is the importance of cross-functional collaboration when thinking about a community team and why that's super important. But also, it's super important because that's how you get a successful community team. So,
Okay, so you
yeah.
you have our full attention. You can take us away now.
Yes, a little bit about myself. If you need to get a hold of me, here's all my things. I'm Erin. I'm again at Orbit. I'm based in Brooklyn, New York, but you can find me probably online way more than I should be at those links there. So feel free to reach out at any point in time. Kind of to run down what we'll be going over today is a quick little brief overview here. We'll go over like the current state of community and business, this concept of value creation versus value capture. Then spicy takes for a why your community needs a community, why your company needs a community team talk. We'll also go over why you shouldn't have a community team, and then how you'll set that team up for success. And lastly, I'm someone who very much likes interactive sessions. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to like shout out at any time or drop it in the chat. I noticed the question features. I'm here for you. Let's make this a conversation and have some fun with it. Cool. So first off, for any of you probably in the community industry, and probably one of the reasons, like you said, was the reasons behind coming up with this conference, is the idea of community has sort of exploded in the past few years. We've seen a spike in industry trends. We've seen a bunch of new investment dollars going to community. We've seen business opportunities. I mean, I didn't even know that community was a job title until the last few years when I found myself with a community title. That's really awesome. But we need to make sure that we're approaching this with the right reasons and the right intention. Right now, many companies and organizations still struggle to find the ways to effectively communicate the value of community teams. And if we can't effectively communicate those values, how are we supposed to set up a community team for success? If you are a community person, I'd love to hear like, how are you thinking about it? What are the metrics you talk about? Feel free. I love an open conversation in the chat. So again, take it away, have some fun in there if you want. We know that many companies have relied on long-term success with community teams. We've seen brands like EA, Among Us, HashiCorp, Shopify, Repeat, and I'm going to even put Orbit down as a company that has achieved some success because of their community team. In the case of EA and Among Us, they enabled their players of the game to have highly collaborative strategies, including shared content creation. If any of you remember the Sims game, that was much driven by community efforts and custom content creation. Early pandemic Among Us kind of took off in the gaming world, much facilitated by their community team's efforts. HashiCorp IPO'd because of their community team's efforts. In their listing, they actually had some of the highest mentions of community. Shopify has very much leaned into this community infrastructure and empowered local creators that use their shops all around the globe in order to see better e-commerce results. Repeat they drive a lot of their product development through empowering the people that use their product as a brand, which is really exciting. And while we've heard of a lot of success, without the proper alignment and intention, community teams are also at risk of a lot of not so great things. Uncertain expectations, high turnover, culture misalignments, communication conflicts, and they can be siloed from other teams, which is not really great when we're thinking of the long-term sustainability of what's to come for a community team. By providing clarity, we can make sure that community teams are no longer just a fad. When talking about any new trend or fad that's happening, I always like to reference this chart. This is the Gartner hype cycle. If you ever want to kind of look it up, one of the things that happens is at the idea of a new innovation or a new trigger, we see a sort of technology trigger that takes off. So this concept of communities really exploded early pandemic, but the idea of communities and communities themselves outside of the business context has actually been around since the beginning of time. Historians have observed even before, in order to survive, our ancestors actually operated in very community driven formats. However, in the business context, we're right in those early hype cycles. We have to make sure for the long run that we're thinking of community in a way that provides long term success. We don't want to have a community team for 3 years just to lay it off. We don't want to have a community strategy for a short period of time just to have it go away. Community needs to be approached as a long term solution to your company's strategy. And that means that companies need to be willing to commit to value creation when evaluating the need for a community team. We'll dive more into what value creation is in a second, but I want to start thinking about in the ways that companies can apply that need. If we think back to the companies I mentioned earlier, companies like EA actually changed a lot of their product development in order to allow more sharing within their communities. If we think back to HashiCorp, their global expansion of events and the way that they approach community collaboration became really powerful for their company's success. Shopify empowers local creators and commerce stores to do their best in what they do. And at Orbit, I'm really fortunate to work with many of our users to help build better product ideas because of what community has been doing. When we think of community, I like to think of the ideas of infinite games and finite games. So this has come through James Cars, which is a really popular concept in the world of game theories and kind of how we start to think of things. And a finite game is played for the purpose of winning, where an infinite game is a game for the purpose of continuing the play. We kind of take advantage of this kind of language and heuristic and apply it to the business world as well. When we think of value capture and value creation, it's definitely divided into the two categories of both finite and infinite games. In value capture, those are those very transactional needs in a community. I think of information retrievals. Has anybody filled out a form or a survey for a community where it was a sales lead and then you're like, ew, super gross? Have you downloaded a report only to be captured and inundated by that endless email drip? The focus is always on the transactional behavior. What am I getting from the community, or what am I getting from the organization, or what am I getting from the individual? Often value capture metrics are measured in conversions. How many people did I get to do X? How many people made a sale? How many people did so and so? When we measure metrics and conversions, we're kind of setting ourselves up for that finite game. Nothing really happens past that conversion point. Next up, we have value creation. So this is like playing that infinite game and thinking of it when we start to think of how the world of community. That means we're empowering creators to create their own content. We're establishing product feedback loops. We're building ongoing beta and ambassador programs that we actually listen to and establish. It's great to have a beta program, but if you don't actually act on that knowledge, then you're not playing a finite or an infinite game. And lastly, you're providing opportunities for the community. That can mean hiring directly from the community. That can mean offering job opportunities or freelance work. Anything that we do that continues the conversation and keeps the user, the customer, or the individual as part of the group for a long period of time, that's a part of a community strategy, and that's part of playing an infinite game. When companies create more value than they capture, people will always learn more things, they'll meet new people, and they'll discover those new opportunities. And of course, the company will get those benefits as well. To kind of put it up on a thing, a nice little image here, what we have here is on the left, we have the value capture. So you'll see that conversation is kind of blended, or the conversation and the value you get from that organization is sort of limited. When we think of value creation, we can only continue to grow our opportunities. Now, breaking it down and summing it up, having some real talk here, companies that are unwilling to play the long-term investment, they're unwilling to play that infinite game, shouldn't invest in a community team. You're going to lead to burnout, you're going to lead to unclear expectations and misalignment among your internal company. If you're not willing to think of those games and the ongoing relationship you have between you and your users, let's rethink that idea of having a community team. We should always be thinking, when we're thinking about hiring a community team or implementing a community strategy, how are you a champion internal processes that enable value creation? Sure, you can hire a community manager or a community advocate, But if they don't have the proper internal infrastructure in place, they won't ever be successful or be actually living up to the full value creation opportunities that exist within your organization. Establishing those internal processes can be like establishing clear relationships of how product and community interface with one another. How is that community individual set up for growth opportunities? What does the team look like? How do they grow as an individual? How are they continuing to create more opportunities, not only for the community, but the company as well? How much bandwidth is the community person enabled or empowered to give more bandwidth to the community? Are they continuing to value the creators within their own community? Do they have a budget to pay freelancers? Can they empower them through opportunities? Do they have long-term cross-organizational collaboration? Couple quick things when we start to think about what this looks like. It has both an internal process and an external process that we must take into consideration. Internally, that looks like those things that often fall under operations or people organization charts. But we need to make sure that we're taking care of a clear organization chart. We're providing opportunities for the community individual to grow. We're giving them a fair budget and opportunities that they have power over. They have metrics that reflect impact. Thinking back to our kind of when we talked about value capture, these aren't metrics that are necessarily based in transaction, but they're about ongoing retention. And they're about how many product insights did you get from the community? How were you able to enact on those? How were you empowered to work on those? Community teams must be empowered and they must be open and given the free will to experiment. And lastly, if you're going to hire a community team, you must have an open seat at the table. Externally, that means that we're giving opportunities and providing opportunities that were hired from the community. Can we hire from the community? Can we build long-term success? Are we able to pay the people who contribute to the community overall? Can we pay the creators that help build the community as a whole? Are we acknowledging or giving credit to the community that helped us build this larger product as a whole? And lastly, are we able to act on the community insights that we get? If a community member is giving you proper insights or proper value, can you actually act on that? Does your product team build on the insights that the community gives you? And if not, are you able to communicate effectively why they're not communicated back to? If you're going to establish a community team, you must be establishing a team with the systems that empower them. We must be thinking about the long-term success of the community team. We must be thinking of the long-term opportunities, and we must be thinking in terms of infinite games. As far as infinite games go, we have to be thinking about ways that the community team can grow and establish far beyond the initial conversation. We need to be thinking about what happens after that initial impact. How are you empowering them and giving them the success to grow and expand with new programs, initiatives, and opportunities for the organization as a whole? As we kind of start to come to the end here and get into more question and answers, I really want to make sure that we're establishing and reflecting on kind of the three pillars I like to think about. A, are you building and establishing a team with the proper intent? That means, are you thinking about the ways that community can be driving new processes, that communities are now, you can think about new processes, you can think about what community is doing for your business as a whole, and really think about, is your organization open to listening to community feedback? At times, this means that your community team might be at odds or might be at, with your product team or also your development team. How do you handle those conversations? Make sure to have that plan in place before moving forward. That means taking the work to establish those internal systems for success. How do we make sure that our community team is empowered and not shortened by what's going on? And lastly, lean into playing the infinite games. How are we thinking about a community team in terms of long-term ongoing success? Or are we just thinking about it in the early transaction stage? This means that we're thinking about fair metrics. How are we establishing a beta program or an ongoing opportunity? And how do we think about the lasting impact that this team has? So kind of without further ado, I'm open to questions and any opportunities that we have here. So open conversation. All should be good. Thanks,
Okay.
Peter.
Hi, Erin. Thank you
Hi.
very much.
Of
Thank
course.
you very much for your talk. That was really amazing. I did enjoy it. And yeah, so that was it about building the question, does your business need a community team? I do have one personal question though. Um,
Mhm.
why you were talking, you made mention of in order for you to be successful in having a community team while playing an infinite game,
Mhm.
you need to have a system that empowers your community team. So I was wondering, what system can one look into, setting up in place while creating a community team that can actually make a company have a firm ground with the community?
Yeah, one thing that I like to think about is what at times like your company or your organization is going to be at odds with the individuals, with the other members of your team. So, kind of for an example, in my day-to-day job at Orbit, we get product feedback all the time. I sometimes that means I'm going to bring that back to my internal team. And systems mean how do you reflect on that process? What channels do you actually go through to make sure that that product feedback is heard? How is it logged? And if there's a discrepancy between a product team and the community team, how is that handled? When do we start to think about these things and building the systems of like what team does it go to? Or even one conversation I hear a lot in the community world is who does community report to? Um, Even having that sort of internal structure and clarity can provide for a lot of insights. So I'm a personal big believer that community should be a standalone team um, in order to have true success. It shouldn't fall under marketing because then you can be susceptible to those growth metrics that are very transactional. And if you're under product, well, we've seen it. I'm guilty of it as well. I came from the product world of having the shiny object syndrome that I want to build, but not necessarily the product that roadmap that is best for the community as whole. So putting yourself in those shoes of thinking through those scenarios, which are kind of tough questions and tough situations at time, is really important.
Interesting. So, so in other words, that actually means why setting up a community team. It has to be, the community department is just like every other department, just like the development department, marketing department, and it should be stated clearly. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's good. That's great. So thank you very much for your talk. And yeah, I believe that was really amazing. So the floor is still open to anyone that has questions. You can actually throw your questions at Erin and she will happily answer them for us.
Yeah, Niall, I love this question about your process. I'd love to hear your process. My contact info is there. Feel free to get a hold. One thing that we do with our community process is we make sure that we like categorize it all. And I love your question of that feedback conflicts with historic themes. Understand why? Like we catalog all of our all of our product feedback and look at it as a whole and also understand there's the I don't even know if it's a true Steve Jobs quote, but there's the Steve Jobs of like, or is it Steve Jobs or like Ford, but it's like if people wanted faster horses or people thought they wanted faster horses but they really, and then we gave them a car. It's kind of misattributed sometimes. But one of the things I like to think about is how can we start to actually better communicate, and sometimes that means getting on before you assume or kind of put someone out to the side as an outlier, taking 30 seconds to get on the phone with them or 30 minutes to get on the phone with them is really important, or a Zoom call, because sometimes it's coaching them through, is it a true outlier, or maybe is it a different way of thinking? And if we're starting to think of that person as an outlier, is it an outlier because they're the first person to think of that, or is it an outlier because they're a true outlier? So actually taking that feedback, one thing that we do is as we get prepared to launch a new feature or we're thinking about a new feature, we actually reach back out to our community members and go, "Hey, we're thinking of this new feature. It was suggested by so and so. What do you think of it?" And then we got open feedback. We're like, "Tell us if it sucks. Like I want to know if it's bad. Tell me if this is a terrible idea." And then being able to communicate why and what's the friction there. And so, yeah, of course, like you have to actually take the time. I think the community thing that's hard, especially for businesses, is we are very quick to overlook or think about in terms of like how much time did the community team spend. Because sometimes if I look on my calendar and I'm like, wow, how many minutes did I spend just talking to people this week? It's a business can very quickly be like, wow, well, you spent a lot of time talking to people, but that wasn't an actionable insight. So it's making sure that the conversations I have are always bringing actionable insights and then having that internal process where I feel valued in a way to actually act on that. Like, can I act on that? Do I have the freedom to experiment and try something new? Coming from a product lens, that means very much working to establish those. Can you do a minimum viable product community? Can you get something just off the ground to test an idea? How much freedom do you have to experiment? This is also why I think we could save this for a whole nother talk on this. But there's another whole topic we could go into about the rise of a technical community person. Where as opposed to a developer advocate, you have more community folks with product backgrounds just so they can better communicate with internal product teams. And I see this other question on campus ambassador programs. I think that's always a really great. I have not personally worked with campus ambassador programs. I know there is a talk about other ambassador programs, but I do believe in the power of an ambassador program. And I think a lot of that comes down to there are so many community members who do amazing things, especially if you work with products. I've worked kind of in the no code realm a lot, and I love the no code realm. And when people come up with tutorials or demos, I think of Notion as kind of one of the key top tier. And I know Ben Lang is also speaking at this event this weekend. But one of the things I like to think a lot about is how are you paying those people back? Are you paying, like, if they're contributing a significant amount of time, energy, effort to your organization, pay them. And that can be hard to hear for some teams. Some teams don't want to think about the budget or the time or the energy or the effort that goes into that all. But we should pay those people, pay your ambassador programs, and also empower them. So one thing that we recently started doing at Orbit is thinking about the last Friday of the month, we talk about a change log. So we actually walk through our current change log. What changes have we made? How have we been thinking about the recent product adoptions? And just giving it an open feedback. That's opportunity for us to get product feedback, but that's also opportunity for our community to start playing around with it. And we get to play together in a sort of fun makerspace way. I think the number of insights that we've gotten from our community members is always cool. There's always a few members that I know are my quote unquote outliers that always find new ways of building the product that I have absolutely no I'm just like, you are so brilliant and I would have never thought of that. But it's sometimes I would have never known that from picking up the phone. Like I work at a tech organization, for example, and one of the individuals in our community who I've actually gotten some of the best product feedback from is someone who has modified our product to work for a church. And they are using a tech product for typically communities of product, but they are using it to measure church attendance and registrations for their youth groups, which is the most like amazing thing. But he provides the best product feedback, and it's so wonderful to see. It's like that good product feedback can come from pretty much anywhere.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. It's always, I'm never like, you never know what direction it's going to go into.
Okay, so any more questions? So Erin is still with us for the next 5 minutes. She has just 5 minutes left. And so if you still have, something to ask, you can just shoot your shot here.
Peter, I just clicked on your profile and noticed that you're doing growth here, and I'm really loving this platform as far as like some of the other ones that I've used. So like big shout out. This is actually really cool in the back. And I'm like, keep clicking around. I'm like, this is cool. This is super cool. All these buttons. Some of them you go into the speaker view and you can't see what's going on all the time. And for sure, always my contact info is there, Peter. You're welcome to take it. I think the other big mistake is like, and something I touched on but didn't go enough into to kind of just quickly chat about it, is the importance of that internal like growth plan for everything. And I think it's something we don't take as seriously. I think we kind of blanket the title and just give everybody a community manager title. And we should definitely be thinking with more intention about what titles do we give our community team and why are they those titles?
Okay. I
Yeah.
think that's another angle as well for discussion. I mean, the community manager is a big word because in order to build communities, in order to build a community, a lot of persons are needed to come into play, or a lot of factors are considered, and a lot of roles you have to do. One of them you can, there one way of building communities by having trying to interact with your community members on ground, and another is trying to getting feedback from those that are using your product and trying to provide support and all that. So that's something that can be split as well, to get to know the different roles in building a community.
Yeah, this is something we recently chatted about at Orbit. And so we kind of have 3 pillars under the community team. So we have more of an advocacy pillar, which is my role. Brian as well is there, and he takes on the more developer side. Then we have sort of like a growth or a growth role, which is kind of cool to see. And that's like growth relations, events, that ongoing stuff. And then we have this third pillar of education. So this is kind of the way that we're approaching this at the current moment, is thinking through what are the 3 primary functions that we have. And as the company scales, when I first joined Orbit, we had about 500 members in the community, and I was hired out of the community. I always joke that they probably were tired of me telling them what bugs I found, and so they had to give me a job. And but I was hired out of the community, and now the community as a whole has about 24,000 members. So
Wow.
we grew from 500 to 24,000, and it's thinking about how do you scale the team is a big. The needs for 500 and the needs for about 24,000 in the community are 2 very different needs.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So it's definitely how do you think through that as a team growth situation? And also, how does the team internally, the team has changed as well. So like I think the 10th employee at Orbit, and we're almost to 50 people now, which is a huge amount of growth, but your team internally is going to be structured differently as well.
Yeah. Oh,
So
that's really cool. That's cool. So that's great. Once again, thank you very much, Erin, for your talk today. We really enjoyed it. It was fun having you around. And thanks for giving us the points to look into to make the decision if our business need a community team or not. So yeah, want to say thank you very much. And yeah, it was really cool chatting with you.
thank you so much. This is super fun, and I'll definitely be around.
Okay, thank you. So thank you all for attending this session. This actually brings us to the end of this session. So in 15 minutes, we'll be having a different talk that is going to be about managing communities at scale. And so let's all move on to the next stage to join that stage for our talk to proceed. So bye and see you on the next stage.